Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Field and Garden Podcast. It is your friend Lisa Mason Ziegler, and thanks for coming on over. So if you're new here, I just really want to give a special shout out to you and say welcome aboard. We just love having new folks joining us. We have just tons of opportunities and resources because, the mission of the Gardener's Workshop is to help train the flower farmers of tomorrow, right? And those folks that maybe want to just grow great flowers. So you can learn more about all of our online courses, all of our tons of free resources, as well as our online garden shop over at thegardenersworkshop.com, who brings this podcast to you. And we just really love being a part of your gardening and farming life. So today I was really happy to catch up with an old friend, Jennie Love, who was a friend, and then we were peers as we served on the board of the ASCFG together. And then I got Jennie to actually do a course or two for us. And I've watched her business evolve so much. And as all of us, right? I mean, COVID has changed everything, as well as Jennie and I kind of call each other the flower hustlers because we are constantly changing and moving our businesses. And I just wanted to catch up with her and let us have another little peek into what Lovin' Fresh Flowers is up to these days. We were talking Farmer-Florist business. We were talking workshops. And we were also talking about the Philly Flower Guild, that collective that is now in Philadelphia, where she's a big part of. So friends, let's take a listen to my conversation with Jennie Love of Loving Fresh Flowers. I am so pleased today, friends, to be here with somebody that's become a really good friend, Jennie Love, which many of you may know, but just in case you don't know, I want to fill in the blank. First off, hi, Jennie.
Hi, Lisa.
Thank you so much for being here with me today. I realize now that I know you do a podcast, I do a podcast, amongst all the things that we're podcasting about.
Right.
There's just never enough time in the day. So I really appreciate your time. So friends, Jennie Love owns Lovin' Fresh Flowers. She is located, her urban flower farm is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Yes, friends. I mean, she is a city farmer just like me. Her farm is a little bit bigger. I'm 3 acres, she's 5. Jennie and I met years ago, but we became to be close friends during our time as we served on the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers. We were both on the board. Jennie was on the board, and then she became the president, and I was on the board. And so we saw each other several times a year and got to eat together a lot. So
I know, I miss those meals. They were the best. There's something about sitting down together to eat a meal that's so rejuvenating.
I'm telling you, and I'm missing those Brussels sprouts.
Oh, yes. Don't even get me started on the Brussels sprouts.
Oh, my goodness. The best Brussels sprouts ever. And Janice Harris, who also we became good friends with everybody, but there's moments that you think of. So I invited Jennie to come on today for us to catch up, we're coming out of I say we're coming out of the pandemic. This is year 3 since the pandemic began. And the pandemic, as it did on so many businesses, had impacts in the flower farming, event, farmer-florist world. And I wanted to kind of just come in and touch base with her about, how are things looking, what's going on, and what are people doing? So Jennie, first, tell us just a little bit about your farm so people get a feel of where you are. And I also want to say, one of the things I love telling about Jennie is that she started in a community garden.
Yes.
for a couple of years, right? The first couple of years.
It was, it was 2 seasons. Yeah, 2 seasons like that. I still look back and I can't quite understand how I did it.
I know, and I totally get it, but I like to encourage people to think we weren't handed chunks of land or weren't married into it or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, so tell us a little bit about what your farm has grown into.
Oh, sure. So I started in 2008, was the first year I grew flowers for sale. Like everybody, I was growing flowers when I was like 8 years old with my grandma, that stuff. But for sale in 2008, I did start in a little community garden plot. It was a 20 by 40 plot. I started going to farmers markets with that and really honestly had no intentions of building what I built today, though I'm very grateful for it. But like everybody else, I think at the beginning, I just sort of winged it and flew by the seat of my pants and waited to see what was going to happen. Little did I know, I had no idea what was going to happen. From that little community garden plot, I quickly built a business and a thriving business. At that time, there really weren't quote unquote farmer florists. I like to claim fame of being the person that coined that term way in the beginning with the very first hashtag on Instagram. But that was my job title because after going to farmer's market for a season, I had somebody ask me to do their wedding flowers. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do your wedding flowers. We'll see how this goes. And so I did my first wedding, and the next year I did 13 weddings. And the next year after that, I did 72 weddings. So weddings quickly became the primary sales outlet for my farm. And in that course of massive growth over very few seasons, I needed more land. So I expanded first to an acre of land that was rented. Then I rented another piece of land that was just under another acre. Finally, eventually in 2018, so 5 years ago now, I bought land to add to the land I was renting. So now I'm at 5 acres in the city of Philadelphia, well within city limits. It's interesting farming in an urban space such as this. I'm very blessed to be able to steward this land, to hold this green space. Lisa, you know, my heart is in wildlife support mostly, you know, turtles, birds, all the things. I farm just as much for them as I do for myself and the flowers. So that is a huge driving force for me. In terms of sales over the years, I went from farmers markets at first, then doing lots of weddings. Also about the same time I started doing weddings, I started doing workshops. First off-site because I was still on rented land and I didn't have a good space in which to teach at my farm. And then as time went on, I added facilities specifically for teaching and now have a big, beautiful barn in which I teach. But workshops have become over the years more and more important to my farm enterprise. And these days, I would say workshops are probably about 60% of my sales, my gross revenue. So they've definitely expanded and weddings have actually retracted a bit. I've slowly worked my way out of weddings quite so much. And the reason for that is to take it all back to the fact that COVID happened. So in 2020, I had 56 weddings scheduled. And March 13th, I can tell you today, it was Friday, March 13th. Or wait, maybe it wasn't actually Friday. I should back up. I'm not sure it was Friday, but it was March 13th. The city of Philadelphia closed down and it did not open again until the next summer was when we could finally start having quote unquote events again. And so literally 56 weddings that I had signed contracts for and planned on being my bread and butter went poof, literally overnight, poof. And so I had to, thankfully, I was a very diversified farm already, and I had to really lean into the other sales channels because that went away, and that's really affected my business ever since. There's been a lot that's changed as a result.
And you know, it wasn't just that you lost weddings and so you weren't going to be ordering those flowers. Those are crops that had been planned and grown.
They were planted.
I just want people to understand the depth of what happened during that time. I mean, it was horrible. Don't get me wrong for all the florists that buy all their flowers. You know, I mean, they all of a sudden had no business either. But for farmers, farmer-florists and people selling to florists, it was like all of a sudden, all these crops that you'd already invested time and money in no longer had a home to go to.
Yeah, we're talking ranunculus that were like, I had, I think, 1,000 some ranunculus that, that's a premium wedding crop. Tulips, I had close to 10,000 tulips. These were all crops that had been specifically planted, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars invested, specifically planted for April and May weddings. And then every April and May wedding was literally gone. So it was pretty, like I kind of, yeah, I look back now and I'm still completely, it's a blur. It's a blur that time. It's kind of what I think I have a bit of PTSD, to be honest. I don't say that lightly. I think it's what I've had to come to terms with, particularly over the past year. It was traumatic. It was a very traumatic
Sure.
experience to stand on the cusp of that. And I had a team that I wanted desperately to keep paying. And I had all these customers that were super upset and their lives were sort of falling apart in front of themselves. And I tried to shoulder all of that. But long story short, it really impacted my capacity and stamina for wedding work. During that time, though, workshops blossomed for me. So after we kind of got past the initial shock of it all, fortunately, because I was considered an essential business, I was allowed to stay open and operational, and with proper safety mechanisms in place, such as masking and lots of social distancing and having the workshops outside in the open air, we were able to go back to having small 10-person workshops through the course of the summer and fall of 2022. And then in that process, I always loved workshops, Lisa. You know that. I love to teach. I love to speak, just like you. But it was those workshops that fed my soul and made it very obvious to me that this is something I really love about having a flower farm, is that capacity to build community, to support community, to be a safe space, a healthy, happy place for people. And that touched my soul. And so now I've sort of switched a little bit, a lot less focus on weddings, still doing them, but a lot less focus, a lot more focus on in-person workshops. I also started teaching online, for better or for worse, during COVID, because we had to. And so I started teaching with the gardeners workshops, courses, do 2 courses with you guys. But also, surprisingly, this weird thing, long ramble coming to a close, I promise. This weird thing happened where my focus went so much more onto building community. And this became very, very important to me to create ecosystems of people that supported each other, just the way an ecosystem at a farm supports all the lives there. And now, as we move forward, I'm working more on building a collective for flower farmers in my region, where we work together to sell our flowers as a group, and also to support each other, to help do
Right.
group purchases and stuff like that too. So yeah, that's a long trajectory, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, but it just seems like such a natural evolution to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody I see what I want to talk about is kind of what you see happening in the farmer florist world now. I know that it's very, very different than where you came from, but how fortunate are you to be able to make that choice? And I think the reason you are able to make that choice is because the way you set up your business to have not all your eggs in one basket. That's where we learn. Oh my gosh. I just hear from people so often that you have something happens to you and you put all of your focus there, and all of a sudden it's not there anymore. COVID, for instance, and you have nothing to fall back on. So for the farmer florist, or those people that feel like, maybe weddings, what a way you built your business. You did big weddings, you did a bunch of them, you
Yeah,
funded your life. And what everybody needs to know is that Jennie, this is her livelihood. There is no other source of
yeah.
income, paying for her land, paying for her projects. So tell us, what do you see in the farmer florist world right now, or in the weddings? What are people, have they gone back to these really big, crazy weddings, or are you seeing more intimate, or what are you doing?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a kind of a toss-up right now, in terms of everybody's kind of got a little bit of a different approach. There's still, especially last year in 2022, there was this huge like groundswell of people just want to have a party. Gosh darn it, I'm so sick of being pent up. I'm going to have a party. And they're going to throw one hell of a party because it was just like, this is what they want to do. You know, they're tired of being told they can't have a big party. There's still a little residual of that and definitely some lavishness that's happening because it was just such a, you know, squelched space for a while. But I think personally, I think the economy is going to come crashing down. Not, sorry, I should edit myself and say that like, not like the economy is going to crash altogether. I just think that inflation and all the other pressures in the economy will start changing the way people are willing to spend money on their wedding as we go through 2023. This is a hunch. This hunch is based off of the fact that I started my wedding business in 2008, which was our last big recession where everything was really challenging. So I see a lot of sort of the trends and the pinch points coming back from that will probably influence the coming year or two. That being said, our consumers are way more aware now of the value of locally grown flowers.
Yes.
And I don't think it will ever be a real challenge to sell locally grown flowers to weddings ever again. I think there's such an elevated level of education that's come about over the past decade that's not a hard selling point anymore. It'll just be a matter of being smart about doing business. And that is one of the biggest challenges when you're first new. You spend a lot of money and you have to spend a lot of money. I'm here to say that you do have to spend a lot of money to start any business, especially a flower farm. It is a money hungry beast that will consume every dollar within a 50-mile radius. So hoover it all up. But eventually at a certain point, you have to start being really thoughtful about your expenses just as much as your profits. So this is one of the challenges of weddings, in particular, doing the large high-end weddings is very expensive to produce. So it can feel really exciting to say my client has a $30,000 budget just for the flowers. That's like, holy moly, somebody's spending $30,000 just on flowers, but that does not mean you take home $30,000.
Oh my gosh.
In fact, usually I found with the bigger weddings, I took home less profit margin than I did with smaller weddings. So as a farmer florist who's kind of been up and down this roller coaster ride in multiple different evolutions of it, I think focusing on smaller intimate weddings, whether that's the trend in the industry as a whole or not, that's kind of important, but not really important. I think farmer florists are best off by focusing on more intimate weddings, where you don't have to have the labor. You know, labor is so expensive, it's complicated. Also, if you have intimate weddings, that's one thing I found during COVID, intimate weddings are more resilient. So we had people that scaled their weddings back to 50 people, had it in their backyard. You know, that's the kind of wedding that can still take place if something like COVID ever rears its ugly, ugly head ever again. And just the profit margin's much bigger in an intimate wedding than in a really big one. So that's what I would say is where I would focus my energy personally.
You know, and wouldn't you say the business side of doing weddings, it's just so easy to get carried away and spend money. You know what I mean? I can only imagine in the big weddings, but the people, and I mean, I hear it, we see it all over social media, and it's not just about doing weddings. People talking about, oh, you can't be profitable doing X, Y, Z. Well, that's really kind of up to really the person that's in charge, and that would be the business owner. You know what I mean? Right? It's your choices. I mean, obviously there's things that happen, but you are the one sitting in the driver's seat as a business owner. And I think weddings, because I've never done a wedding, so I can really talk about this, not really, but it seems to me it would be so easy to get out of control with your expenses and your help meeting the demands if you don't know how to take care of your customers, your client, that's really a problem. I guess that's perhaps one of the things that I know I've told you this before, and I'll say it again here, I sat outside of the room in the hallway listening to Jennie record her online course for us, Farmer-Florist School Online, the wedding process. And as a person that has never, after 25 years of farming, ever done a wedding, ever wanted to do a wedding, ever being willing to even listen to anybody talk about doing a wedding, for me to be doing it, listening to that and hearing the backside of the business part, which you never hear anybody talk about.
Yeah.
Nobody ever talks about it, Jennie. It's like, all right, there are steps, there are equations to come up with your pricing to make sure you are making money, that you aren't overspending. You don't sell brides flowers, you sell them the look. Is that what we're the color palette?
Yeah, the aesthetic. Yep. And the service you can provide them too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that that's really, really missing in the big picture now. And I think we have this whole new influx. I know one of the things you talked about during COVID when we talked was that there are so many opportunities now for farmer-florist. Do you still feel like that's true, that the florists that got chewed up and spit out during COVID have like hung up their hats and have gone home? And it's the perfect time to start a farmer-florist business because there's so many options, right? Is that?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely plenty of room in the marketplace, which is great for sure. And there's a way now. COVID forced couples and changed the culture of the wedding industry as a whole. Before COVID, and I feel bad that I'm still talking about COVID so much in my life, which is ridiculous. But before COVID, wedding couples could have anything they wanted. Essentially, there was very few people in their world that would tell them no. If they had the money for it, it would happen. Somebody would figure it out and they would make it happen. With COVID, and then ultimately the supply chain issues that came from COVID. So it wasn't even necessarily COVID. I mean, yes, there was a lot of people having to rebook and everything with COVID, but then once you were able to have your wedding, the answer still was often no, because you couldn't get the things that couples said they wanted, or you weren't legally allowed to have, a 200-person wedding or something. And it reset the industry. And I think that was a really healthy thing. That's one of the silver linings of COVID, is it was sort of like, nope, you have to be a lot more flexible with your vision. You have to trust your vendors, whether it's a florist or a caterer or whatever. You have to trust your vendors to figure it out for you and let them do their work. And that hopefully will perpetuate. I hope that wedding vendors stick up for themselves and continue to have a firm hand instead of just letting wedding couples kind of dictate what is happening. So the way that translates to the farmer-florist is that more and more couples now will only come to you with a color palette and not this like, I need this like, color of rose, I need this color of orchid, I need this, they understand now, because every florist they've talked to has basically said like, look, we'll do our best. I don't know what colors are important to you. And that's really helpful for us in the way we do wedding work. And then the other thing I would say to anybody considering doing weddings is just streamline the process as much as you can. I do talk about this in the course, and it's advice I will freely give, is that you set up a business that works for you, and you set up systems that work for you, and then the customers that can appreciate that system and what you offer are the customers you serve. You do not try to serve everybody and spread yourself too thin and take on lots of extra stress. As farmer florists, we have a lot of stress in our lives already. We're trying to grow the flowers. That's stress enough. So you take that bit of stress, hold on to that stress, but get rid of all the other stress. And that really just comes down to one of the things I think can be helpful right now, particularly with an economic pressure that's bubbling, is creating packages, like more cost-effective packages. And it looks more competitive for the customer. The customer thinks it's a better value, but what is really, really the secret sauce here is that you on the back end make sure it's going to be profitable for you. And so you tool that package, you fine tune the mechanisms of that package to make it very seamless, straightforward for you and your staff if you have them to produce it in the shortest amount of time, like the least amount of labor, the least amount of stress. And that's how you actually, whether there's a pandemic, whether there's an economic crisis in the forefront, whether it's the most beautiful, glorious time ever to be a farmer florist, I don't care. Regardless, that's the real way to be successful, is to make that happen. Yeah.
You know, it's almost like COVID flushed out or helped us walk away from some of the outrageous things that had just started to happen, because we all saw them. And I think that that mountain is so much lower for farmer florists to walk up now, because nobody has that peak, you know. And I think people, customers really understand that and appreciate it. And like you said, people know about local now. I mean, it's finally happening. I wasn't sure it was going to happen while I was still around to see it. You know, it's been a long road for a lot of people before us to help pound that pavement. But that's just good to hear that the opportunities are still there. But it's really about the way you run your business. It doesn't matter how much they goo over the flowers you hand them. If you're in the hole or you didn't take home a good profit on this job you worked your butt off on, which I know happens all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And people don't talk about it. And that's one of the reasons, you know, I did have to push Jennie to do this online course. And it's not one of the, I mean, as most of our courses are, they're about the stuff that nobody else talks about. They aren't flashy. It is just the business. And I just appreciate that so much, which brings me to my next question.
Yes.
So the workshops, that was something else that took a big old hit during COVID. And you actually, I mean, didn't you, I'm trying to remember, I think so making workshops work for you, which is another course that Jennie has done with us. Isn't there a bonus section in there now about doing workshops when you're under those types of conditions of having COVID?
Yeah, you just gotta like be flexible and get outside, and for me it was just about being able to teach outside and have backup plans and everything like that, being able to have more space and so forth like that. But yeah, I found workshops to be way more flexible than weddings. And ultimately, it's funny because when you first approached me about teaching an online class and kind of twisted my arm into that, which thank you, I now say thank you for that. But I weddings were this thing that I thought was like the most valuable thing a flower farm or a farmer florist, because workshops are a farmer florist function, you know, like you still have to be a florist of some sorts to really necessarily like teach design workshops, at least. But I really didn't understand just yet the value of workshops. And now I actually would probably encourage people, definitely do weddings if that speaks to you. But I think almost every flower farm should consider doing workshops. I really think it is a wonderful way to make money. Ultimately, we need to be here to make money. We need to build wealth for ourselves, and wealth can't be a dirty word. I have so much to say on that topic, but every farm can, as long as you have the space. You have to have, that's what the online class that I teach with you is about, but you need, you know, parking, you need a toilet, you need a roof to get everybody under if it rains. There's certain things, but besides that, once you get those things in place, it's going to be rare as the farm that won't have an appreciative customer base for workshops on the farm.
Don't you find once they come, they want to come to everything, even though it may be the same exact workshop? But I want to say that one of the things that I appreciate the most about your course, and I know it's about the way that you teach it, is that, you know, if you're farming and you're selling flowers, you do have something to teach. You may not be able to teach design arrangements, which is not me. I mean, I am by far not an arranger. But there are a lot of things about a flower farm that people love coming, whether You just make a handheld bouquet, which is what we did with people for years, and cutting them. And I mean, the simplest part of what we do every day is such a gift to people, and just coming and walking around the farm, right?
Yeah, it's the space. It's the space. And that's what COVID taught me, was when I watched people walk into the farm and you could literally see the weight drop from their shoulders. You could see them get out of the car, take a deep breath, look around, and just suddenly they were a completely different person. Like their whole energy changed. And then they would come into the workshop space, into my barn, and they would suddenly at first be a little bit tentative and shy. And by the end, they're all laughing. They're like exchanging phone numbers. They're so happy. And it's that sense of community and that sense of a beautiful, healthy, natural space that is such a gift we can give the world, to give our community, not even just the world, give our immediate community, give our neighbors. And ultimately, that is so much more valuable to them than any like physical thing. So they are not there. Ultimately, maybe the first time they come, they're there, and usually, yes, the first time they come, they're there because they wanted to learn how to make a bouquet, or they wanted to learn how to start seeds, or they wanted to learn whatever it was that you said they were going to learn. But we have so many repeat customers, and I'm talking customers that come, like I do like 20 plus workshops a year now. They come to all 20 one year, and then they come back for all 20 the next year. And these are not wealthy people. These are not people that are just like frivolous, like they're not even what I call fangirls. Like I know there's a lot of people listening here who might be like, well, Jennie, you're Jennie, so that's not going to happen to me. These are not my repeats. My repeats are people that work for like the utility company at a desk job, who just want something nice and relaxing to do on the weekend.
Right.
And they come back over and over and over again. And it's because of the space. It's because of the energy. So for those people who maybe have a flower farm but feel completely intimidated by the idea of inviting people in to do workshops, you do not have, it helps to be a good teacher. It helps to have a good space, all these things, but stop thinking about what you have to be and start thinking about what a gift it is you're giving, and that they're coming there just for the experience. They're coming there. They're coming for so much more than your capacity to teach them. And if you just create a really good experience, they will be back over and over and over again. And the profit margin for workshops is by and far the best profit margin of any other sales outlet I've seen, because it's high value, it's a value added sort of capacity. So yeah, you can go to farmer's market and you can sell a boatload of flowers that way, but there's a certain price point that maxes out at a farmer's market.
Right.
And you have to go to the farmer's market and you have to make all those bouquets in advance, which is labor in that. You have to cut all of that stuff. Instead, if you invite people to your farm, they come to you. You didn't have to make any bouquets in advance. You can get them to harvest the stuff if you really want to. Like, it's just so much less labor that goes into it.
It's true. And that's kind of what the course tells people, is how to feel confident, because you're well planned out on how to do it, where to get the customers, how to price, what you need to think about. So I just wanted to bring that up because I totally agree with you. You know, we don't have in-person workshops here currently, haven't done it for a couple of years. I mean, we used to do multi-day boot camps. And I mean, while they were a lot of work, we loved doing it. I mean, we cooked for them. Bobo cooked.
Wow.
I mean, we had people drive from Texas and Louisiana to Virginia to come to them. I mean, that's what makes you realize what we have that we think is every day is really spectacular.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, because I think people need that little booster. And then I'm just going to ask you one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. So you guys have started a collective in Philadelphia, and we have a mutual friend, Amelia. And I think Amelia has really just brought collectives to the forefront of so many people and how wonderful they work. And instead of looking at your flower farmer across town as competition, coming together and working together to build a collective, which is, tell us what a collective is.
Oh yeah, sure. So a collective, I like to refer to my collective as a hub, but a collective just generally stands for this idea of a group of flower farmers, or any farmers, I suppose, but we'll speak in flower farmer terms, a group of flower farmers who are working together to collectively sell their crops, to sell their harvest. And what legal entity that takes is up for grabs in terms of, like, you can start a formal cooperative, which is a legal structure. You can have a more, like, a one farmer can start it and it'll be an LLC. You can just sort of have a loose handshake on a bunch of things and figure it out from there, whatever. So that's why we use the term collective, just because it's a little bit more generic, but it's essentially a co-op. Whether it's a legal structure or not in terms of that. And it really cuts down on what the benefits for the farmer are, that you have one person then taking care of your sales, your marketing, your logistics. And so that frees up the farmer to farm more ultimately, which is what I, as the person who's leading my collective, it's called the Philadelphia Floral Guild. If anybody wants to find us, we're at Philly Floral Guild on Instagram, and then our website is www.philadelphiafloralguild.com. But anyway, what I want my fellow flower farmers out there growing more flowers. Like, I don't need each of them to be marketing. We'll do the marketing for them. And that's really streamlining. It's helping growers grow. And then from the florist side of things, it's a lot easier because now they can come to one central location and get flowers from many, many farms in one spot. It reduces all their driving around. And they can order online through Rooted Farmers. That's where Amelia comes into this equation. She started an online e-commerce sales platform called Rooted Farmers that aggregates orders. And that, without that, it would be much harder to do this, for the record. So thank goodness for Rooted Farmers, because I had this idea like a decade ago, but it was just so darn complex to figure out how to take orders for multiple farmers and keep inventory organized. But Rooted Farmers takes care of all of that. So it's been really great. We started here in August of 2022. We sold nearly 40,000 stems in 10 weeks, about $60,000 of sales. And this is wholesale. Our hub is wholesale. So we're a wholesale distributor for Philadelphia Florist. And the sky, as far as I'm concerned, is the limit. I actually just had a podcast interview the other day for my podcast, No Till Flowers, with Diane Sukavetti, who is the grower for Mold Farms, who started the Seattle growers wholesale market, I think is the proper term for it. But she was telling me, I don't know if you knew this, Lisa, she told me that they did $3 million in annual sales in 2022. So that's one co-op, flower co-op, sold $3 million last year. So I think there's so much potential here once we get it's about getting the system in place. But once the system's in place, I think it's going to rock and roll.
Well, I mean, so basically, for anybody that doesn't understand, this is basically a wholesale house that is run, and everything in there is grown by farmers instead of stuff being shipped in. And I think that the pandemic, again, really gave us the opportunity to showcase that there are local farmers. And, you know, when Amelia reached out to us that she wanted to do a short course on.
Oh, right. She has one with you. Yeah.
Collectives 101. And it just really shows people how to do it. You know, how can you be a part of a collective? What are the steps? What's it like? What to expect? And I mean, she can talk from the perspective of, she was a part of a collective. She's in charge of a collective, and she has guided collectives all across this country do like what you're doing. She has been a big part of that. So I think it is the future. And
I want to clarify, if I can, just really quick, for anybody listening who doesn't understand, when you say, like, yes, we're a wholesale distributor, but we're not buying flowers from farmers to wholesale. So the difference here is, like, yes, the farmer could sell to a wholesaler and they would get, like, say 50 cents for that one stem. But when you sell through a collective that's a farmer hub, like what we're talking about here, the farmer makes all of that money, except for a small amount that's reserved for admin fees and stuff like that. But so basically, it's a much more profitable sales model for each
Yes.
farm
Yes.
than it would be if you went and just sold to this big wholesaler over here.
Right.
So that I think is it kind of takes out the middleman essentially. No,
Yes.
no longer is there a wholesaler middleman. Now a flower farm can work collectively with other flower farms and reap better profits at wholesale for that. So that's the real beauty in it.
And I think one of the things that I've learned, because I've had a lot of conversations with Amelia and I've had done podcasts with her, you can find it here. I do not know the number of the episode, but that what they've learned, because she's a numbers girl. I mean,
Yeah, she is.
knows all the numbers. Farmers that sell through co-op, collectives, hubs, whatever you want to call it, turn out to sell more flowers than they were independently.
Yeah.
And you don't feel like that's what's going to happen. You're thinking, oh my gosh, why are they going to buy mine if there's so many other people's stuff? The buying power that the commercial world brings when they can get it all from one place is powerful.
Yeah, it's about volume. That's what it is, because your average florist is not going to go buy 10 bunches of something from this one farmer, then turn around, get in their car and go, another half an hour down the road, get 5 bunches from this other grower. Instead, they need volume, they need convenience. So yeah, once you start marketing collectively, suddenly there's enough volume in your collective inventory. That's what it's about. There's volume in your collective inventory that attracts people to come by. And then the more the buyers come in and sort of start to window shop with you, so to speak, to browse that online ordering system, then they start being like, ooh, look at that. Okay, I'll just add that to my cart. Oh, look at that. Oh, I'm going to try that. And, the next thing you know, they've ordered something from every farm in the collective. And these are farms. One of the farms in my collective, she joined late in the season. It's Alyssa at Liberty Plants. She's awesome. And she had actually been on Rooted Farmers, the platform, as an individual farm and had basically made no sales on there as an individual farm. And I invited her to come on with PFG, the Philly Floral Guild. And she was great. She was game for it. But she said, Jenny, I've never made a sale on Rooted. I don't understand. How is this going to work? And then she joined the collective and instantly had sold out everything she had in Rooted. And that's because not only is there more volume in the collective, but also each flower farm has its own sort of customer base and its own sort of pool in the local economy. And when you bring that all under one umbrella, it just amplifies it. Everybody gets a bigger piece of the pie, even though you would think that you would maybe end up with a smaller piece of the pie, but you actually get a bigger and bigger piece of the pie because the pie gets bigger. The pie itself gets bigger.
Right. And it's so hard for upcoming growers. And there is just no better way. I mean, because I hear from people that are applying to become a part of a collective. And that's one of the things that Amelia shares in her course. It's like, this is what you'll need. This is the level you need to be at. This is what these are the right answers. This is what we're looking for, because everybody's got investment here and you want to make it work for everybody. Because she said, sometimes we'll say, come back next year, get growing under your belt for a year, because they have so many new, young and upcoming growers. But my goodness, I just want to be a flower farmer again. I want to go back to farming and selling. I wanted to stay home and farm. This is the model that allows that possibility potentially. So I just wanted to, hear because I know that you talk to Amelia and work with her, and it's just a great model. And I do believe it's the future of the domestic volume.
Well, it's the way that we really actually take market share away from imports. As individual farms, we won't even be a pin on the map. We're nothing. We're not even a grain of sand on the map. Even Love and Fresh Flowers, which has, a lot of weight in the farmer-florist industry, but my farm can't do jack crap, when it comes to changing the global floral industry. Uh,
Right.
but if we can form collectives and the collectives are successful and they can do things like $1 million or $3 million in sales annually, then we start to actually compete at the same level as the big
Right.
wholesalers. And then we get that, you know how there's that like, statistic that's always batted around that 80% of flowers cut flowers sold in the US today come from somewhere abroad. I think that statistic's shrinking a little bit, by the way, but that's how we really make that change to
Right.
that statistic where someday maybe it'll be like 50% and then 40%. And, but until we sell collectively, our little farms can't make big change. So joining together means we make big change. Yeah.
Yeah. Equally yoking. That's what it's all about.
Yepers.
All right, Jenny. Well, thank you so much for kind of bringing us around to 2023.
Whew,
It is.
already.
And yeah, it's in our rear view mirror now, we hope.
Yeah, I hope
So
so.
thanks for bringing us up on the farmer florist industry and what your take is on it. And I just love talking about workshops. And I think collectives are what we are going to be talking about more and more and more in the future. And we
Yeah.
wish you the very best of luck. So thanks so much.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to chat. So I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon.
All right, folks, what do you think? It's always just good to hear what other people are doing, right? I mean, I know that helps me so much. Sometimes you get that all of a sudden, it's like, why didn't I think of that? Why have I never done it that way? And that's the way it is for all of us. And we always learn something really, really good. And I was just really grateful that Jenny was able to come on and share with us. And friends, if you want to learn more about Jenny and her courses with us, she does 2 courses with us. One of them is a school. It's Farmer-Florist School, the wedding process. And friends, it is all about business. It's nothing to do with design. It's all about setting up your farmer florist business, what to grow, what not to grow, pricing equations, contracts, the whole enchilada. So there'll be a link to that underneath in the show notes here, as well as her on-demand course, which is called Making Workshops Work for You. And that's a shorter course. It's only about 4 hours long, I think. And she shares the ins and outs of actually, finding customers. How do you be a professional? What setup or do you need? And just kind of gives you that confidence backbone the information that you actually need to prepare to do workshops. And one of the things that I love that I think I mentioned in our conversation is that she shares that if you are flower farming and selling your flowers, people are so enamored with what we do. Workshops can be maybe not actually a workshop, but you can have like farm visits and how to monetize that and how to actually do it legally. And so there's just a lot of great information in there. And lastly, I will also put a link to Amelia Ihlo's course, Collectives 101, if you're thinking about becoming a part of a collective or you're trying to start one, which is just a great course. So all those links are down below, and you can learn more about all of this and more over at thegardenersworkshop.com. And friends, thanks again for dropping in. Ciao.